She said it clearly enough for the table next to theirs to hear. Not shouted, not cruel in the way that requires effort, just spoken, the way a woman speaks when she believes the person across from her is not worth the lowering of her voice. I can't be seen with a mechanic. The restaurant was the kind of place that had cloth napkins folded into shapes, and a sommelier who introduced himself by name. The kind of place where saying something quietly still carried 3 tables in every direction. Joel Hartley did not move. He did not push back his chair, did not look for the exit, did not check whether anyone had heard. He sat where he was, hands flat on the white tablecloth, and looked at the woman across from him with an expression that was not anger and not hurt and not embarrassment. It was recognition. He had seen this before. Not from her specifically, but from rooms like this one, from people who looked at his hands before they looked at his face, who heard his job title and quietly revised their estimate of him, who filed him into a category and closed the drawer. He had stopped being surprised by it 2 years ago. What surprised him now was not what she had said. It was the sound of the door behind him opening, and the voice that followed it. The blind date had been his sister's idea. Carolyn had presented it the way she presented everything she believed was good for him, with the specific enthusiasm of someone who had decided the outcome in advance and was only waiting for reality to confirm it. "Her name is Petra," Carolyn had said, over the phone while Joel was in the middle of changing a brake caliper on a 2019 Land Cruiser. "She's 31. She works in finance. She's intelligent and she's funny, and she is exactly the kind of person who would be good for you." "I'm fine," Joel had said. "You haven't been on a date in 14 months. "I've been busy. You've been hiding." He had not argued with that, because arguing with Carolyn required energy he did not currently have, and also because she was not entirely wrong, and he respected accuracy even when it was inconvenient. He was 36 years old. He owned and operated Hartley Automotive on Clement Street, a repair shop he had built from a rented bay and a used diagnostic machine into a 12-bay operation with 4 full-time mechanics and a waiting list. He had a daughter named Wren who was 8 years old and had very strong opinions about breakfast foods, the correct pronunciation of particularly, and which of the neighborhood cats could be trusted. He had been a single father for 3 years. His wife, Della, had not died. She had left, which was its own kind of loss, slower, more administrative, with paperwork and mediated conversations, and a morning when he had stood in Wren's bedroom doorway watching his daughter sleep, and understood that his job from that morning forward was to make sure she never learned to associate love with the particular uncertainty of someone who might not be there when she woke up. He had been doing that job every day since. He was good at it. He was also, as Carolyn had correctly identified, not doing much else. So he had said yes to the blind date. He had pressed his good shirt, the dark blue one, the one that did not look like it had been ironed on a kitchen counter, though it had been, and he had booked the table, and he had arrived 6 minutes early, because arriving late to things felt rude, and he had sat in the restaurant that had cloth napkins folded into shapes and waited. Petra arrived 4 minutes later and was, as advertised, intelligent. He knew this, because she talked for the first 15 minutes, with the particular fluency of someone who was comfortable being interesting, about her work, about a conference she had attended in Geneva, about a documentary she had watched the previous weekend. It was good conversation. She was sharp. She had a dry sense of humor that surfaced in brief flashes, and then retreated, as if she was deciding how much of it to deploy. He liked her initially, in the careful way he liked most people initially, with genuine interest and without assumption. And then the sommelier came to the table, and introduced himself by name, and asked if they had made a decision about wine. Joel said he was fine with water. The sommelier looked at him with the practiced neutrality of someone trained to reveal nothing, and moved on. Petra's expression changed. A small recalibration, barely visible, but Joel had spent 8 years reading the small signals on people's faces. The moment a customer realized the repair was going to cost more than they wanted, the moment an employee was about to ask for something they were nervous about asking. He read faces the way he read engines, by the small sounds and small shifts that told you what was actually happening underneath. He saw her recalibrate. She covered it quickly, asked him something about the shop, with the polite attention of someone asking a question they have decided is due diligence. He answered honestly. She asked a follow-up. He answered that too. And then the conversation moved on, and they ordered, and for a while it was genuinely fine. The moment that broke, it was small. A man at the adjacent table, someone Petra apparently knew, came over to greet her. He had the effortless ease of someone who moved through expensive rooms without noticing they were expensive. He shook Petra's hand warmly and looked at Joel with a brief, assessing glance of someone used to making quick determinations. "Friend of yours," he said to Petra. And Petra smiled and opened her mouth and said something Joel did not catch because the room was noisy, and the man nodded and moved on. But in the half-second between the question and the answer, Joel had seen her eyes go to his hands. His hands were clean. He was always careful about that, the particular effort it took, before anything social, to get the last of the day out from under his nails, to make sure the skin at his knuckles was clear. He had good hands, strong, worked honest. He was not ashamed of them. But she had looked at them, and after the man left, the conversation was different, not hostile, just adjusted, as if she had finished making a decision she had been working on since the sommelier. She asked him what he drove. He told her. She asked where he lived. He told her. And then, setting down her wine glass with the particular care of someone who has decided to say something, the silence chosen their moment was the kind that fills a space I can't be seen with a mechanic. 2 tables away, a woman in a green dress set down her fork. 1 table over, a man turned his head a fraction of an inch toward them and then away again, the practiced motion of someone pretending not to have heard what they had clearly heard. Joel looked at Petra. Her expression was not unkind exactly. It was the expression of someone who believed they were being practical, realistic, doing them both a favor by naming the thing honestly instead of stringing it out. He understood the logic of that in a detached way. He was a practical man himself. He was also a man with a daughter who was going to grow up in a world where people said things like that, and who needed to know, from watching him, how a person of dignity received it. So he did not raise his voice. He did not perform wounded pride. He did not reach for the exit. He picked up his water glass and drank from it, and when he set it down he said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "I understand. That's an honest answer. I respect honest answers." She blinked. She had expected something else, defensiveness, or wounded silence, or an argument. His acceptance of it seemed to confuse her more than any of those would have. "It's not personal," she said. "I know," he said. "It's just—" She paused, searching for the word. "Positioning." He nodded. He understood positioning. He positioned his shop in the market every day. He understood that everything had a value assigned to it by a context, and that the context of this room had assigned him one. He just did not agree with the assignment. He was about to say something else, something measured and final, the kind of sentence that closes a conversation with dignity intact, when the door of the restaurant opened behind him. He did not turn at first. He heard the hostess greet someone, heard the sound of a man's voice, warm and familiar in the way that certain voices are immediately familiar even when you have not heard them in a room before, heard the hostess's slightly elevated register, the one she used for people whose reservations were flagged. And then Petra's face changed. The recalibrated expression, the positioned, practical expression, went through 3 different things in approximately 2 seconds. The first was recognition. The second was something that resembled pleasure, the automatic social pleasure of seeing someone you admire in an unexpected setting. The third was a look Joel did not immediately understand. He turned. The man who had walked in was 63 years old, with silver hair and the kind of face that had not gone soft with age, because age had not had enough material to work with. He was wearing a jacket that had not been bought recently, but had been maintained with the care of someone who understood the difference between new things and good things. He was talking to the hostess with the ease of someone for whom ease was simply the natural condition. He had not announced himself. He had not done anything that announced him. He had simply walked into a room, and the room had adjusted. His name, Joel knew, was Bernard Whitfield, and Bernard Whitfield had, 6 years ago, been the first person to give Hartley Automotive a commercial account. The story of that account was the kind of story that sounds small in the telling and was large in the living. 6 years ago, Hartley Automotive had been one bay and a used diagnostic machine, and Joel working 14-hour days and eating sandwiches at the workbench because there wasn't time for anything else. Wren had been 2 years old and staying with Joel's mother 4 days a week, and the whole enterprise was held together by the specific stubbornness of a man who had decided this was the thing he was building and was not going to stop until it stood. Bernard Whitfield had driven in on a Tuesday in October with a Range Rover that had an intermittent fault 3 other shops had failed to diagnose. He had been, at the time, the managing director of a mid-sized logistics company whose fleet of vehicles was maintained by a larger corporate provider who was, as Bernard had put it, expensive, unreliable, and apparently unable to fix the one car that actually mattered to him personally. Joel had found the fault in 40 minutes. It was a CAN bus communication error between the engine control module and the transmission. Intermittent, irregular, the kind of thing that only showed up under specific temperature and load conditions. The larger shops had been looking for hardware failure. Joel had looked at the fault pattern and understood it was a software handshake problem and had fixed it the same afternoon. Bernard had sat in the small waiting area of the single-bay shop, a plastic chair and a coffee machine that only worked if you hit it firmly on the left side, and watched Joel work, and at the end of the afternoon, he had paid without argument and asked one question: "Do you do fleet contracts?" Joel had said he did not currently have the capacity. Bernard had said, "What would you need to have the capacity?" Joel had told him honestly, 2 more bays, 1 more mechanic, the right diagnostic equipment. Bernard had said, "I'll give you 6 months of volume at above market rate if you get there. Not charity. I need reliable work and I'll pay for it." He had paused. "I know what good work looks like when I see it. I don't see it often enough." That conversation had been the turning point, not because the money alone had done it. The months had still been hard. The growth had still been earned. But because the account had been the first signal to the market that Hartley Automotive was something worth taking seriously, and markets responded to signals. In the years since, Bernard had sent 7 other business owners Joel's way, without ever making a performance of it. He had never asked for anything in return. He had simply said, when Joel had once tried to express something like gratitude, that he found reliable things and supported them because the world did not have enough of them, and there was no more to it than that. He had met Wren once, when she was 4, when Joel had brought her to the shop on a Saturday because his mother had been unwell. She had been sitting on the worktop eating a banana and conducting an extremely serious conversation with the socket wrench set, which she had decided were a family. Bernard had looked at this scene and said, with complete seriousness, "She's going to be fine." Then he had gone to get his car. Joel had thought about that sentence several times since. Bernard Whitfield scanned the room the way people scan rooms when they are looking for someone, which he clearly was, and his eyes found Joel before they found anything else. Something crossed his face. Genuine pleasure, clean and unperformed. He said something to the hostess and came across the room. Joel stood, because that was the thing to do, and Bernard shook his hand with both of his, the particular 2-handed grip of someone for whom this is not a performance, but a habit formed over years of meaning it. "Joel," he said, "I didn't know you were coming here tonight." "It was a last-minute thing," Joel said. Bernard looked at the table, at Petra. His expression did not change exactly, but something in it became alert in a way Joel recognized. The look of a man who has walked into a scene and is reading it. Petra was looking at Bernard with an expression that had moved entirely away from the composed, positioned face she had been wearing. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, and her voice was different, the careful warmth of someone addressing a person whose opinion of them matters. Bernard looked at her. "Petra, I didn't realize you knew Joel." Yes," she said. A pause. "We were just having dinner." Bernard looked between them, and Joel saw, in the particular steadiness of Bernard's expression, that he had understood the room faster than Petra had expected. "Joel," Bernard said, "I've been meaning to call you this week. The Doncaster account, they need their fleet looked at before the end of the quarter. I was going to ask if you had the capacity." "I can make it work," Joel said. Bernard nodded. Then he looked at Petra with the particular directness of someone who has decided to say something and has measured the cost and found it acceptable. "This man," he said, "kept my company moving for 3 years when my previous provider was charging me 40% more to do half the work. He diagnosed a fault in 40 minutes that 2 other shops spent 3 months pretending didn't exist." He paused. He is also the most honest person I have done business with in 20 years. The pause that followed was different from the silence after Petra's sentence. That silence had been the kind that contracts a room. This one was the kind that opens it. A woman at the next table had stopped pretending not to listen. The man who had come to greet Petra earlier was watching from across the room with the expression of someone reconsidering their earlier assessment. Petra's face had done something complicated that was still in the process of resolving. Bernard looked at Joel. "I'll call you Monday." Then, quietly, just for him, "You don't owe this room anything." He moved to his own table. Joel sat back down. The dinner continued for another 22 minutes, because neither of them knew how to end it cleanly, and there was still food on the table, and some situations have to simply run their course. Petra did not apologize. He had not expected her to. Apologies required a person to revise their position, and revision required first admitting the position had been wrong, and that was a sequence that took some people minutes, and some people years, and some people never. She was not a bad person. He was clear on that. She had said a true thing about herself, which was more honest than most people managed. She had said, "This is the value I assign," and the value she assigned was not the value he carried. That was a real incompatibility, not a moral failing. He was not angry at her. He was thinking about Ren. He was thinking about what Ren would have seen if she had been there, what she would have seen when Petra said what she said, what she would have seen when he received it, what she would have seen when Bernard walked in and said what he said. He hoped, if Ren had been watching, that she would have seen this, that her father did not shrink, that he did not argue or perform or require the room to agree with him, that he received an unkind thing with stillness, and waited, and was still standing when the room corrected itself. He hoped she would have seen that the correction came without his help, because he had not needed to engineer it. He had simply been what he was, and what he was had been witnessed by someone who knew. That was not always how it worked, but when it worked that way, it was worth remembering. He paid the bill because he had booked the table, and that was how he was raised. Petra offered to split it. He said he had it. She said thank you with the slightly stiff formality of someone navigating a situation they had helped create, but were not sure how to navigate out of. They parted at the door with the particular politeness of two people who know they will never see each other again, and are both fine with that. Joel walked to his car. He was home by 9:15. His neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, had been with Ren since 7. She lived 4 doors down and had 2 grown children and a vast expertise in the specific blend of patience and firmness that Ren required when she was in the mood for an extended conversation about whatever she had been reading that week. Ren was still awake when he came in, which was technically past her bedtime, but she had the particular talent of appearing to be asleep at the sound of any adult footstep, and then immediately surfacing when the footstep was his. He put his head around her bedroom door. She was sitting up with a book about deep-sea fish, and the expression of someone who had been caught, but was not yet prepared to concede. "You're supposed to be asleep," he said. "I was almost asleep," she said. "Anglerfish are genuinely disturbing, by the way. They should come with a warning." He came in and sat on the edge of her bed. She studied his face with the focused attention she brought to everything she decided was honest, was worth studying. "Ren considered this," she said. "Is that the same as nice?" Was she nice? Sometimes, he said. Thought about this honestly. Not always, because Ren asked honest questions a corner of her page. Honest answers. She was that kind of reader. Because teaching her that the answer to everything was fine would be doing her a disservice. Did anything interesting happen? "Mr. Whitfield was there," he said. Ren's expression changed. She had met Bernard Whitfield once, 4 years ago, and had developed a specific opinion of him based on that encounter. The opinion was favorable, largely because he had taken her conversation about the socket wrench family seriously and asked several follow-up questions. "What did he say?" "He said some good things," Joel said. "About the shop." "In front of her?" "Yes." Ren processed this. She had a remarkable gift for following the architecture of a situation without needing all the bricks spelled out. He had always thought this was the most extraordinary thing about her, the speed and accuracy with which she read the shape of things. "Good," she said, with the particular finality of a child who has reached a verdict. "Why good?" he said, not because he disagreed, but because he wanted to hear how she said it. She looked at him with the gray eyes she had inherited from him and the precision she had inherited from nobody in particular, as far as he could tell. Because you deserve to have someone say a true thing about you in that room, she said. And you would never say it yourself. He looked at her for a moment. You should be asleep, he said. I know, she said. But she said it warmly. The way people say things they mean to be heard through the words themselves. Not just the words. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway. Dad, she said. Yes. Was Mr. Whitfield's car okay the last time he brought it in? Fine. Good, she said. He seems like the kind of person whose car should always be fine. He pulled the door most of the way closed and stood in the hallway for a moment. He was thinking about what she had said, about deserving a true thing said about him in a room, about the fact that she understood that without being told, at 8 years old, in the specific way that children understand things when they have been watching carefully. He went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table and did not think about Petra or the restaurant or the cloth napkins or the sommelier. He thought about his daughter and his shop and the list of things he was building and the particular satisfaction of being exactly what you are in every room you walk into. He was not performing for anyone. He did not need to. Bernard called at 9:10 on Monday morning, while Joel was under a Volvo XC90 working on a heat shield that had developed a rattle the owner described as like a maraca, but angrier. He took the call standing in the bay, wiping his hands on a shop cloth. The Doncaster account was 12 vehicles, commercial vehicles, mixed fleet, mostly diesel, the kind of regular contract that meant 4 months of steady work and the possibility of a longer relationship if the first quarter went well. Joel said he could take it. Bernard said good. Then he was quiet for a moment in the way he was sometimes quiet, not empty quiet, the kind that was working toward something. I owe you an explanation, Bernard said. You don't, Joel said. I was not planning to say what I said at the restaurant, Bernard said. I'm not in the habit of announcing things about people in public. It felt. It was fine, Joel said. It was necessary, Bernard said. And then, because he was not a man who dressed things in more words than they needed. I heard what she said. Joel said nothing. I was at the table behind you when I came in. I heard it before she knew I was there. A pause. I want you to know that I didn't say what I said to rescue anything. I said it because it was true and because it deserved to be said in that room. Joel leaned against the bay wall. The Volvo was dripping faintly. Through the open doors of the shop, Clement Street moved at its usual Monday pace. A delivery van double-parked, a woman with a pram navigating around it, 2 men in hard hats standing by a road crew van. I know, Joel said. She's not a bad person, Bernard said. I know that too. She simply hasn't learned yet that the value of a person and the value assigned to them by a room are not the same number. A pause. Most people learn that late, if at all. Joel thought about Wren, asleep over the anglerfish book, about what she had said about deserving a true thing. I have an 8-year-old, he said, who already knows that. Bernard was quiet for a moment. Then you've done the most important thing right, he said. They discussed the Doncaster contract for another 8 minutes. Rates, schedule, the contact at the fleet company. Practical things. The kind of conversation Joel was good at, where what was said was what was meant and no translation was required. After the call, he went back under the Volvo. The heat shield was a simple fix. 2 bolts that had vibrated loose over time. The bracket slightly warped. The whole thing taking about 20 minutes to sort properly. He sorted it properly. He always did. The Doncaster account ran well. The first quarter came in clean. No comebacks, 3 warranty jobs handled without fuss, and a call from the fleet manager, saying she had not had a provider work this way in 4 years, and could she put forward a recommendation for the parent company's national contract review. Joel said she could. The shop had 14 bays now. He had promoted one of his mechanics, a young man named Theo, who had the same instinct for electrical faults that Joel had for everything else, to lead technician. He had hired 2 more. Wren had moved on from deep-sea fish to glaciers, which she described as rivers that forgot how to move, but in an interesting way. He had been on 2 more dates, both set up by Carolyn, both of which had been fine in the way that things can be fine without being significant. And then there was Margot. Margot was not set up by anyone. Margot was Bernard's daughter, which was a fact Joel had not known when he met her because she had introduced herself as Margot and given her last name as LeClaire, which was her mother's name and the one she used professionally. She had come into the shop on a Thursday because the car she drove, a 10-year-old Saab 9 to 5 that she described, accurately, as a commitment, had developed a noise at the back end that 2 previous mechanics had told her was too old to fix economically. Joel had looked at it for 15 minutes and told her it was a rear subframe bush, a common failure on that model, a half-day job, and not expensive. She had sat in the waiting area that now had proper chairs and a coffee machine that worked correctly on the first press, and read a paperback book, and not tried to make conversation, which Joel had noticed because most people in the waiting area either needed conversation or needed reassurance, and she needed neither. When the car was done, she had paid, and thanked him without the slightly elevated warmth that some people deployed when they were surprised to find a tradesman competent, and left. She had come back 3 weeks later with a different noise. That was a wheel bearing, also not expensive. She came back a third time, and there was nothing wrong with the car. He had looked at her across the counter with the level expression of someone who understood what was happening. "The car's fine," he said. "I know," she said. A pause. "There's a cafe across the street," she said. "If you have 20 minutes. He looked at the bay. Theo was running it well. He had 20 minutes. "Let me wash my hands," he said. She waited outside, and he washed his hands the way he always washed them, thoroughly, with a particular care he had taken for years, and came out, and they crossed the street to the cafe. It was not the kind of cafe that had cloth napkins or a sommelier who introduced himself. It had laminated menus and a radio playing something with a lot of guitar and a woman behind the counter named Dee, who knew Joel because he came in on Thursdays. Margot did not look around the cafe with the expression of someone deciding whether it was appropriate. She picked up the menu and asked what was good. He told her the bacon roll was the best thing on it. She ordered the bacon roll. They talked for 40 minutes. Not about anything positioned or calibrated. About the Saab, which she had owned for 8 years, and was attached to in the way people get attached to things that require continuous effort. About the city. About a book she was reading about infrastructure. About whether rivers were more interesting than the people who studied them believed, which Joel noted was a position his daughter held strongly on the subject, and which Margot immediately declared was a sign of excellent judgment. He told her about Wren. Not the whole story, not the first conversation, but enough. The anglerfish, the socket wrench family, the 3 things and the one question. Margot listened the way certain people listen, with her whole attention, and without planning her response in the middle. When he was done, she said, "She sounds like the kind of person the world could use more of." Joel looked at his coffee cup. "She's 8, he said. "Some people figure it out early," Margot said. He thought about that. He thought about what it meant, that some people figured it out early. That Wren had looked at a situation she only knew half of and identified the thing that mattered, that he deserved a true thing said about him in a room. That Bernard had walked into a restaurant and done that very thing, without being asked and without calculation. That there were people who moved through the world with the compass already pointing true, without adjusting it for the room they were standing in. He had been trying to be that kind of person his whole adult life. He was not always sure he managed it. "She gets it from watching you," Margot said. "Children who figure things out early always get it from somewhere." He did not know what to say to that. It landed too directly to answer quickly. He looked at her. "Your last name isn't LeClaire," he said. "Is it?" She looked at him with the expression of someone who has been read correctly and is deciding whether to be startled by it. "My mother's name," she said. "I use it professionally. People treat you differently when they don't know immediately who your father is." Joel nodded. He understood that logic. He had spent his adult life being treated differently because people knew immediately what he was. She had spent hers being treated differently for the opposite reason. "Bernard Whitfield is your father," he said. "Yes," she said. "He's never mentioned you." "I asked him not to," she said. "I like to meet people without the introduction." He thought about this, about the Saab that kept developing minor faults, about the 40 minutes in the cafe, about the way she had not looked around the room when she sat down. "3 times with the car," he said. She looked at him steadily. "The first time it was genuine. The second time was less certain. The third time I was hoping you'd notice." He looked at her. "I noticed the second time," he said. Something in her expression shifted. The composed professional face, softening the way faces soften when a person is surprised by themselves, by the particular warmth of being seen clearly by someone who wasn't looking for anything else. "I should have come in sooner," she said. "The bush was a real problem," he said. "The bearing, too." She almost laughed. Not quite, but close. The cafe radio played something that had lost a guitar and found a piano. Dee refilled their coffees, without being asked. Clement Street moved past the window in its ordinary Monday way. Neither of them was in any hurry. He told Wren about Margot on a Saturday. Not everything. The broad shape of it. A woman whose car he had fixed, who he had been having coffee with, who seemed like someone worth knowing. Wren was eating cereal and reading about Glacier Retreat, and did not look up from either for approximately 30 seconds, which was her processing interval. Then she said, "Is she like the dinner lady?" "No," he said. "Good," she said. She went back to the glaciers for another moment. "What's her name?" "Margot." "Has she met me yet?" "No." "Does she know about me?" "Yes." Wren put down her spoon and looked at him with the gray eyes that missed nothing. "What did you tell her?" "The anglerfish," he said. "The socket wrenches. The three things in one question." Wren considered this carefully. She was the kind of child who applied the same attention to information about her own situation that she applied to deep-sea fish and glaciers, which was to say, complete and unsentimental. "That's a fair representation," she said. "I thought so." She picked up her spoon. "She can come for breakfast," she said. "I'll make the decision then." He looked at his daughter. "The decision about what?" he said. She gave him the look she deployed when she believed a question did not require an answer. He understood. He went to make more coffee, and Wren went back to her glaciers, and outside, Clement Street was doing what it always did on Saturday mornings, moving and stopping and continuing, and the shop was quiet one street over, and the Saab with the replaced bushes and the new wheel bearing was parked outside a woman's apartment 7 blocks away, running perfectly, as things tend to run when they have been properly looked after. The world will decide what you're worth before it knows who you are. The only answer to that is to be so completely yourself that eventually the world has to revise its answer. That's the only revision that lasts.